Take a look at this map of the Eastern Mediterranean. In the mid-13th century, Venice and Genoa were entirely ignoring European land borders. Instead, they spent 14 years locked in the War of Saint Sabas, battling exclusively over access to the wealthy trading ports scattered across these coastlines. Outfitting massive wooden fleets to control those routes required enormous capital. Building the galleys, supplying them, and paying thousands of rowers drained the treasuries of both republics. Venice offset this burden through highly organized state infrastructure. They relied on maritime colonies like Crete and Zara to supply and fund their warships, funneling resources through massive shipyards like the Venetian arsenal. Genoa took a different approach. Instead of relying on loyal subjects, they filled out their rowing benches by hiring the cheapest foreign mercenaries, largely Lombards who had no personal stake in the Genoese Republic. The disparity in crew loyalty showed early on. Venice won the early pitched battles, forcing the Genoese to avoid fleet-to-fleet combat and resort to raiding Venetian merchant convoys instead. By 1266, years of severe financial constraints and corner-cutting had eaten away at the operational capacity of both navies. Both sides were running out of money, and a major confrontation was imminent. In the summer of that year, the two fleets finally cornered each other off the coast of Sicily, near the port of Trapani. The Genoese commander, Lanfranco Borbonino, arrived with 27 ships. The Venetian commander, Jacopo Dondulo, brought 24. Borbonino held the numerical edge, but he was aware of his fleet's internal rot. He had zero trust in his hired Lombard mercenaries, knowing being ready to flee the second the fighting turned against them. The mathematics favored Genoa, but 27 galleys are useless if the men holding the oars are actively looking for an excuse to desert. Borbonino made a radical decision. He ordered his fleet to anchor near the shore, positioning the galleys side by side with their sterns facing the beach and their prows pointed out to sea. Then he literally chained the ships together. This diagram illustrates the military logic. Linking the galleys into a solid wall theoretically prevents an enemy from flanking the line. The chains also created a continuous deck. If the Venetians concentrated their attack, the Genoese could quickly shift soldiers across the ships to defend the vulnerable point. But Borbonino had a hidden motive. Tying the ships to the shoreline served as a physical mechanism designed to keep his own mercenaries from diving overboard and swimming to safety. He was so desperate to hold the line that he began pulling local Trapanese men from the shore, promising them 1 gold agostaro coin per day to row and fight. The strategy pitched to the Genoese War Council was an impenetrable defensive wall. The reality on the water was a floating cage built to manage the potential desertion of the crew. When Jacopo Dondulo arrived and saw the chains, he saw a fleet that had physically surrendered its ability to maneuver. It was an immediate admission that Borbonino didn't believe his men would stay in the fight if they had any way to escape. Dondulo ordered a head-on assault. Even with contrary winds pushing against their prows, the Venetian rowers drove their galleys straight into the Genoese wall. The static line held against 2 strikes. On the third attempt, Dondulo's ships pierced the formation, severing the chains and dragging 3 Genoese galleys into open water. This physical break triggered a total collapse of morale. Seeing the links snap, the fleet lost its nerve. The exact scenario Borbonino tried to prevent happened anyway. The mercenaries dropped their weapons, abandoned their benches, and leaped into the water to swim for the Sicilian coast. The aftermath was absolute devastation for Genoa. Every single one of their 27 ships was either captured or burned. 1,200 men drowned, and another 600 were taken prisoner. The chains held, but the men didn't. The fleet's structural integrity failed the moment the crew realized they had a physical path to the beach. Borbonino survived the battle, but upon his return home, the state put him on trial for cowardice. He was banished and fined 10,000 Genoese pounds. Meanwhile, Dondulo returned to Venice a hero and was elected Captain General of the Sea. But he resigned shortly after, clashing with a doge who preferred escorting convoys over hunting down the remaining Genoese. A total fleet wipeout and a 100% loss of ships usually signals the end of a conflict. At Trapani, it didn't even slow the war down. Because this was a conflict over trade routes, there were no territorial invasions. Genoa simply opened its treasury, purchased, and launched an entirely new fleet of warships just months later. The lasting lesson of Trapani is that even the most brilliant defensive engineering cannot overcompensate for bad economics, cheap labor, and a crew that does not want to be there.